Welcome to what will now be episode 3 of Spinal Stories. And this week, I'm pretty chuffed to have Andrew Slorance with me, who I've met on a number of occasions. Unfortunately, we're having to do this virtually today. I'm in Aberdeen and you're in Forres, I presume.
In Forest, that's right.
Yeah. And I have a number of limitations at the moment, which mean I can't reach you. One being my hand, which I've injured, and the other being I don't have a license that is valid at the moment. So I'd be
Oh
brave.
dear.
Yeah, separate story with the DVLA and hand controls, but it's all fine. It's all in order. It's just a paperwork thing, but it does mean that I'm pushing about for now, or not so much. Uh,
Okay.
but I first came across you or your company shortly after my own injury. So I was injured in August 2020, and I think maybe November, December that year, I saw that Phoenix Instinct had won the Toyota Mobility Foundation, and I thought, oh, hang
Mm.
on a minute, what's this? And it was all completely new to me, and I was just getting used to the injury. But I remember being very excited because I thought, here's a company and here's a person who looks like they're genuinely interested in making a new piece of technology, something innovative for wheelchair users that has never been done before. So, by way of introduction, that hopefully doesn't sell you too short, but perhaps you want to introduce
Okay.
yourself briefly and then we can
Sure.
back on.
Well, yeah, I'm Andrew Slorance. I am the founder and CEO of Phoenix Instinct. I first had a spinal injury when I was 14, which was in 1983. Like Danny, it was an August injury, August the 13th, at about 20 past 4 in the afternoon. I was in a Boyne, a small Scottish town, and I, with my cousin, decided to climb the biggest tree we could find, as you do when you're 14 at a time before there were consoles or anything else to do. Now seems what a crazy decision. A long way up this tree, the branch I was standing on creaked. I thought, had this feeling for a second, unbelievable feeling of it's going to snap and there's nothing I can do. And it did. And then I had a further unbelievable feeling of sort of falling backwards. And that vision of the ground coming up close is real. That's what happened. That's what I remember. I remember smashing branches as I went down, like a big cut on the side of my face. Next thing I remember, I'm waking up, lying on the ground, and looking up at this tree, thinking, "Well, Andrew, you really messed up this time.
Mm.
Dad is going to be fuming. We were away for our holidays. The funny things you think of as a wee boy, as you lie there with a broken back, hasn't occurred to me yet. I'm paralyzed." And that all went a bit of a blur after that, and I was taken away, and it was 4 months in well, for 2 months on what they had a striker frame, it was called. Now, Danny, you might know what a striker frame is,
Don't
but
actually. I don't.
him being a doctor and all, that there's a striker frame was a very narrow bed about this wide, about as wide as an ironing board, and had a space for your face, and you'd lie face down with a gap like this staring at the floor. And every 2 hours, they'd bring another piece of this frame and they'd bolt it onto the top of this. So now you're sandwiched between these two frames, and they'd spin the whole thing 180 degrees. So now you're lying on your back. 2 hours later, they'd spin it. Now you're lying on your front, back. And this was how they fixed broken spines and stopped you getting pressure sores.
I mean, I can see the rationale
I used
behind
to
it, but
scream each time. I was in Aberdeen Royal Infirmary, and I would scream each time they would turn it around because I thought I was going to fall through the middle onto the floor. Um, and then one day, while lying face down, an occupational therapist came in and she said, "Andrew, I've come to order your new wheelchair. Do you want pneumatic tires?" And I said, I don't know what that means. She said, "Okay, well, do you want air in your tires or do you want solid tires?" I went, "Air." And then she said, "Do you want desk arms or full arms?" I said, "I don't know what you mean." She said, "Well, you're going back to school, aren't you? So you probably want desk arms. You can get under the desk." I said, "Yes, yes, okay." And a couple of weeks later, she wheeled in this chair and parked next to my bed. She said, "Andrew, I've got your new wheelchair. I hope you agree it's rather a nice example, and it's very much nicer than many others I give out." And she walked away. I spent the next sort of 6 weeks lying on the striker frame looking at this wheelchair thinking, "You've got to be kidding, right?"
mm,
I had my race bike at home, which was my pride and joy, that I could cycle no hands. It was the only thing I was actually really good at. And this is it. And from then on, I did go back to school and you build back your life and it seems impossible. And I look at photos of me now, look at photos now of me then, and I think, how did that wee boy cope with this? And you do. It's just one day at a time. You don't look too far ahead and don't look back. Um, but I would look at my chair through the years thinking, there's got to be something better than this. There's got to be better. I would look at mountain bikes being developed. They didn't have mountain bikes then. They had BMX bikes. They became mountain bikes, and they had 20 gears and suspension, and they're made of carbon and titanium and all this stuff. And the wheelchair was just the same. And every few years, I'd get another wheelchair. Lightweight wheelchairs did come along by about 1986. So my first few years was in a hospital style chair, the kind of thing you'd see in the doorway of B&Q or Tesco as a
Mm.
courtesy chair. I go past those now and think, hell, how did you manage with that?
Yeah.
I got my first lightweight chair about 86. It had quick release wheels, it had a folding backrest, it had adjustable center of gravity, it had a rigid frame, it had scissor brakes, it had clothes guards, it had side guards, it had spoke guards, it had the whole thing. And this was it. This was massive. This was a huge piece of development in a few years.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's it. From here, wheelchairs are really going to get advanced. But they didn't. They just didn't. I'd buy another one, another one. Each time I'd have this expectation that somehow my life was going to be better because I got a new wheelchair. Perceptions would be more positive towards me. I would have an ability that the previous chair didn't give me, but they didn't. They were all the same. By this point, I'd actually built a career in TV production. Probably 15, 20 years had gone by. I was working for ITN as a video editor at Channel 4 News. I had a good job. I built a good life. I traveled around the world. But my wheelchair still was rubbish. And it bothered me. And I thought, if they're not going to do it, I am. I started I eventually decided I was bored with TV production and I wanted to do something more worthwhile with my time. And I made the decision I was leaving and I was going to make a new wheelchair. And so I did. Being a wheelchair user makes you very resilient.
Hmm.
How hard can it be to do your business? It can't be harder than being paralyzed. It can't be harder than going through that when you're 14.
Hmm.
Um, So I'm not one of these people that says, oh, wow, being paralyzed was the best thing that ever happened to me. No, if I could live that day again, I wouldn't climb up that tree. I've no doubt about that. Um, but I built a company. I called it Carbon Black. And this was going to be a full carbon fiber, all singing, dancing wheelchair.
This was
And
when,
I did it.
what year was that when you
This
started?
would have been 97, something like that.
Okay, so going back a couple
No,
of
no, sorry,
decades.
no, hang on, 2007, 2007,
2007. Okay, still almost
2007.
decades.
Yeah. And I I eventually got investors on board in this business and we got it to market and it was quite nice. It was a great chair. It wasn't breakthrough technology. It was very stylish. It was very carbon fiber, very nice,
Hmm.
but it didn't work out between me and the investors. And I was learning to be a founder, learning to be a business owner, an innovator. And between them and I, at the time, it seemed a great idea to have investors on board, but you quickly learn as a founder that actually it wasn't that great. You're I won't go into all the ins and outs of it, but eventually I left. I was pushed out.
Yeah.
And so I found myself in a position where I had put everything on the line, given up my career in TV production, and I didn't have a job anymore. And my company was carrying on, owned by investors.
I mean,
And
many
this
people
was
just stop there. What made, did you consider doing that?
consider,
Well, many people would, I would imagine, would feel quite
oh, I see, would I have
discouraged by
stopped
that.
there? Oh God,
Yeah.
yes. I thought this is right. Well, it didn't work. I was still a shareholder in the company. I just didn't have a job with them anymore. It was owned by investors. They put in their own people in the driving seat. They thought that they could achieve massive goals and huge profits. And that's what investors want. They're not interested in your story. They're not interested in how you want to advance wheelchair technology. They're interested in how much money you can make. And if you don't make enough money, well, sling your hook. We'll get someone else.
Yeah.
And that was their line on it. So I thought either I'd go back and try and get a job, try and get back into TV, or I take what I've already learned and I go again.
Hmm.
And that's what I did.
Yeah.
I started again. I had an idea for a luggage system. Being a video editor for ITN meant I had to carry lots of editing kit. I was the only wheelchair user in TV, certainly in TV news, that would go on remote locations and have to take your editing kit and get there, do the story, and get home again. So I'd improvised some solutions to carry what was at the time quite heavy editing kit,
How did you
and I
manage
took
back
those
then?
ideas. Sorry.
How did you manage back then?
Well, the first time I said to my boss, I want to travel with the job because all the editors traveled and I wasn't getting any traveling. I went to him and I said I wanted to do this, and I thought he would say, "Look, mate, you're not going to be able to get to the story. There's going to be a problem. You can't be on lead story and not be able to get in." And he didn't. He said, "Fine, stick your name on the list. The next job's yours." And within 2 days, I was called up by the news desk that said, go to the garage, get the editing kit, which consisted of two aluminium flight cases weighing about 20 kilos each, and get to Belfast and come back this evening. And I was like, my God. And I saw these cases. I had no means of carrying them. So the next job I got, I'd made a trolley that I could put the cases on. I actually went to Argos and I bought a garden trolley. I butchered it and put some different wheels on it, found a way of fixing it onto my frame of the wheelchair. And I used that for 7 years as a video editor at ITN for carting all my kit around. Um, it wasn't a bag, it was actually just a trolley that attached to the chair.
Hmm.
So when I started Phoenix, I thought, I wonder if I can commercialize that, if I can evolve it into a bag and a better coupling system. And so I bought a 3D printer. I learned CAD on YouTube, 3D CAD, and I created something. And by this time, I'd come to a settlement with my previous employers that gave me enough money to kind of get. So I went to a tribunal, never actually got that far. They settled with me. And it gave me enough money to survive for about a year before I had to get a job. And in that time, I developed Phoenix wheelchair bags.
Hmm.
I ran a Kickstarter campaign that got funded, and that allowed me to leverage a grant off Highlands Islands Enterprise. And I managed to buy some stock. And then Phoenix was going. And about a year later, Toyota launched the Toyota Mobility Challenge. And the remit of the competition was they were looking for 5 companies that could develop a piece of technology that would revolutionize mobility for someone with lower limb paralysis. And it had to include intelligent systems. So I had to Google what they meant by intelligent systems and found out obviously it's a control interface that will work with the person. And so I thought, wow, I can do this. I was a little bit very burnt from my last making of a wheelchair, but the winner of this competition would get $1 million of development money. And so I went for it. I wrote a proposal, I made a video, I became a semi-finalist and then a finalist. We got some seed funding to develop a prototype of what is now called the Phoenix Eye, the first
Hmm.
hybrid wheelchair. And I was able to employ some people with the funding that we got. And it's finally in 2020, we won the Toyota Mobility Challenge, beating 4 other companies. And there were some pretty serious tech there.
Yeah,
And
where were there? I don't quite remember. I remember looking at the competitors and thinking, blimey, that's you've got some pretty strong competition there. But I was really happy to see you actually come through and win it.
but it's funny how it unfolded because at the time, leaving my previous business was devastating.
Mm.
But now it was the best thing ever because I'm investor free.
Yeah.
I don't have those people in my life trying to dictate where the business is going and meeting their targets. And I've been able to evolve this wheelchair as I want it. And so what we've created is a lightweight carbon fiber chair with electric front caster wheels. And that may seem like, oh, how can that work? And even I thought when we were developing it, is this actually going to work? Is it going to be completely unruly and just be uncontrollable? Is it going to have enough grip to be able to help you up a slope? And the answer was, yeah, it's amazing.
Hmm.
It's amazing. The people don't realize how much of their energy is lost because of those little front wheels. And even just the vibration of the road slows you down. The reason wheelchairs get stuck on stone chips is because those front wheels are only turning because they're running on the ground.
Hmm.
And so when they come against an obstacle, they just stop. Whereas when you make those wheels electric and they've got their own propulsion, they just drive over the obstacles.
Yeah.
And all the drag caused by the texture of the road and undulations and everything that you come across is gone.
Hmm.
And so what we've got here is a chair with an inbuilt power assist. We weighed one yesterday at 6.5 kilos transfer weight.
I saw that. That's
Uh,
very impressive.
yeah, so it's even its transfer weight is lighter than a lot of standard lightweight chairs, and you've got an inbuilt power assist.
Mm-hmm.
I can I just have a new level of mobility. I can't explain enough, Danny, that when I first used one after 40 years of pushing a wheelchair, some 15,000 days as a wheelchair user, I just feel liberated. I
Mm-hmm.
move so easily. I can I go backwards now. You don't push wheelchairs backwards, it's too awkward. But
Hmm.
now I come up to a door, I've got power to go backwards and power to go forwards just by rotating the front caster forks.
Yeah.
I've got downhill braking. All those years of holding on to filthy tires because it's wet and slippery in the British weather. I just turn the dial and I've got electronic braking. I turn the dial, I go faster. I can carry my coffee from my kitchen to my lounge without hardly touching the wheels.
Hmm.
Obviously, I still have to steer, so I'll still transfer the cup to the other hand, but I don't need to push.
Hmm.
Um,
So
it's got far more benefits than I ever imagined.
yeah, and the Phoenix Eye is obviously, well, one of the main topics of conversation I was hoping to talk about. And at the time of recording, that's not yet released to the public. Is that correct? It's
A
maybe
week away.
a week away, so that's maybe by the time this video is live, it will be. But before we get onto that, I'd like to go back, if I may, to the
Mm.
Phoenix Eye itself. Where did the name come from for Phoenix Eye? Can you talk a bit about that?
Well, the Phoenix Eye came from the intelligent systems that Toyota Mobility Foundation uh, it said we had to include. And obviously, the company is Phoenix Instinct. And I
Yes.
called it Phoenix Instinct because that's what you need to survive as a wheelchair user. You need that ability just to carry on regardless. No matter what happens, most of us just get up and keep going. And in the morning, you might think, oh, you got to try and push yourself upright, go through that task of transferring out of the bed. But once you've done it, and you keep going. So I figured every one of our customers has that Phoenix instinct, as I call it. And there was a little bit of a poke in the eye to the investors that I had left, that didn't
Really?
matter what they did.
Reactions.
It couldn't, yeah, it couldn't compare to
Yeah.
what I and every other person living as a wheelchair user goes through.
That's really nice. I like that. And the other company, I also remember seeing the chairs from Carbon Black initially when they came out and thinking, wow, they look like something from the future. They look as close to a kind of Formula One wheelchair as you could.
Mm.
Very stylish, very elegant, all carbon fiber. Uh, yeah, very, very desirable. But there's a big difference between what was being made then and what's being produced now.
Well,
Um,
what was being made then was, I always felt a little, I was very proud of it, but I was a little disappointed that it couldn't deliver more independence and mobility. It was
mhm,
light, it was easy car transfer, it was compact, it looked amazing, so it was good, it was empowering. But this is completely different. I move with this in a way, with the Phoenix Eye, in a way that I haven't moved for 40 years. When I'm at traffic lights waiting to cross over the road, a pedestrian crossing, I will just pace from one side of the crossing. Wait, like someone who's maybe cold on a cold day will stamp their feet and move around. I now do that, and I think, God, I used to do this as a kid, and I can see the guys in the cars waiting at the lights, looking at me, thinking, how's that moving? How is this guy moving?
yeah.
Because I've got this perpetual motion of just being able to kind of move from one side to the other, move around, go backwards, go forwards, and you can't see it. You can't see that it's coming from the front wheels.
That's really interesting. If I got to a set of lights, the first thing I do is put my brakes on and think, oh, okay, I'll have a little rest now. But that's really interesting that you just pace from left to right. And I would imagine you do get a lot of looks and a lot of interest.
I
Uh,
get a lot of looks, and when I go through the supermarket, when you're on that really flat floor, obviously wheeling is easy anyway. But I always thought that I'll go back a little bit. I was always resisted power assists.
mhm.
I'm from a generation where power is surrender and use it or lose it mindset. I now don't think like that. Once I've had it, I could never go back. I could
Really?
never go back to pushing a chair again. It just seems like too much energy, energy sapping effort. Even just moving around your office day to day, the amount of effort it takes to actually get the wheels started and move, and you're so restricted. Carrying something like carrying a piece of photocopier paper, you go onto the copier, grab it. What are you going to do with it? You're going to push your chair while holding a photocopy. You just crease it, put it
Yeah.
on your lap. It'll just float away. Stick it in your mouth. It'll get wet. And it's those sort of things that are now not a problem. I got to the copier, I grabbed the paper, and I just coast off.
Yeah.
And I put my hand down to steer a little bit, and I hardly ever push the chair at all. So when I was going through the supermarket the other day, and I'm just drifting between one aisle and the other, I'm hardly touching the wheels. And I passed another lady in a wheelchair, and it just took it back to me. She looked like she was giving it all the effort
Mm.
just to move from one bit of the aisle to turn around and get across to the other. And my heart broke for her. And I thought, God, I really hope that we get this widespread and that in time, other companies will adopt this technology
Mhm.
and we'll see hybrid wheelchairs everywhere and it'll be the norm.
That's
Because
interesting.
we're a little company, we can't make thousands of these, but there are lots of big companies out there that can.
Yes.
And there's not a reason this system wouldn't work
No.
on those other wheelchairs.
No. And there's a lot of
Other
parallels.
than the fact we've got it patented, of course. But
Yes. But I remember thinking when I first saw this, comparing it to one of my other main hobbies is cycling, and the innovation and technology in cycling as the years have gone by, electronic shifting, lighter and lighter carbon aerodynamic frames. There's been so much innovation and production on a mass scale to get these bikes to a relatively affordable point for the average person, but wheelchairs still are at the point where, for this wheelchair, for example, I got support with it was £5,500, and it's an aluminium wheelchair. It's nothing super fancy, and yet people are surprised and appalled in equal measure to hear that. So I would like to see a future where this sort of wheelchair could be scaled up to an industrial scale as well. But
it's
I'm
the same thing happened with prosthetic limbs.
mm,
Go roll back the clock 20 years, and a prosthetic leg was a plastic imitation of a leg. It
mhm,
didn't do anything. It was just a stiff prosthesis.
mm,
And it was the German company Ottobock decided that they were going to revolutionize limbs.
mhm,
And they put intelligent systems into limbs, made them of lightweight material. And now, someone's got a prosthetic leg, you wouldn't even know, but they'll also wear them with pride because the tech is so brilliant
yeah,
that they're not held up by it. If you've been through a spinal injury, you've lost that mobility, that independence, that there's always that I need to show that I've still got it. I need to show I don't want any help. I can't hide the fact I've got a wheelchair. I don't want to be considered disabled. And those people who are using those limbs now, I don't even think they feel they've got disability at all.
no, I think
And
you're right there.
dare I mention that, the amazing athlete that he was Oscar Pistorius. I mean, when he used to run around the track, I would look at his legs and think, my God, that's amazing.
Hmm.
How do we get that technology into chairs? And
Hmm.
of course, it's moved on since then. Now artificial limbs have sensors. They match the gait when you're walking. They know if you're going to trip, and they adjust how the I don't know what they adjust inside.
Hmm.
Um, and the hands, they're extraordinary. So these have gone from things that insurers would pay small money for to now costing an absolute fortune. But the insurers know that those people can get back to work if they've got this technology.
Yeah.
Altobot did clinical trials to prove that someone that had an intelligent limb would more quickly return to work and would more would cost the insurer less money overall on time off and mental health support.
Hmm.
So maybe there is hope that the very basic manual wheelchair can be evolved, and the big medical or mobility corps will get behind it and think, actually, there's mileage in this. Because when you look at their power chairs are amazing. Their
Yes.
power chairs have got all the tech. It's just the manual wheelchair. It's worth a few $1,000s to the big mobility corporation, and they don't want to spend millions evolving it. And the
Hmm.
little companies can't afford to do it. So the big companies won't do it because they've got to keep the shareholders happy, and the little companies can't do it. But things are changing. Companies like Toyota are stepping into the frame, and those big mobility corps should be very, very concerned.
Hmm.
If they're not, they've got their head in the sand, just like Kodak did way in the past when they didn't believe digital photography was something to be worried about.
Hmm.
How wrong they were.
Well, I'm
I mean,
quite
Toyota
excited
told me
to.
if they didn't diversify, they'll be gone in 20 years.
Yes.
And it's not just Toyota, it's Hyundai, it's Toshiba, it's all of them. They're all doing it. Honda. And when you look up Honda mobility and Toyota mobility, you'll see some pretty clever stuff that they're working on.
Hmm.
And you can be sure they've got a very serious global strategy. I see a time when wheelchairs are connected. They could be connected to your child's skateboard so that you can make sure he doesn't go too far away when you're going through the park. And when you're coming to the Toyota bus, the bus will know you're coming, and it will fold out the ramp and release the charge port for you. I can see all sorts of evolution happening that would never happen
Hmm.
if it wasn't for electric cars and the demise of the combustion engine.
Yeah.
These big guys are coming.
That's fascinating. I feel lucky to be alive in a time where that might feasibly be the future. Um, I'm interested in what you said about the feeling of giving up to power assist, and it's something I thought about too myself when thinking, would I get an electric chair or even a power assist? And I thought, well, if I can push it, why shouldn't I? Isn't it exercise? But actually, even though I've been injured a relatively short time, I found that, especially on long days, 12 and a half hour days sometimes, I'm pushing a lot. And a lot of that is arguably unnecessary. It's hugely fatiguing and it leaves me feeling completely wiped after the end of the day. I think if I could cut out those middle bits where I'm just going from A to B so that I can save my
Yeah.
joints, my dexterity for
It's also
yeah.
that pushing a wheelchair is energy inefficient. It's calorie burning inefficient. Your
Mm,
arms are not designed to burn calories. Your legs are. Your arm muscles are too small to be good at burning. And I found to burn a decent number of calories pushing a chair, you have to push a massive distance or do it very fast or be going uphill. Pushing around through the day has very little impact on calorie burning. If you want to burn calories as a wheelchair user, get on a hand bike. And so I actually have got a hand bike, and that's my exercise now. I used to think, I'm not going to do exercise. I push a wheelchair all day. My joints will be knackered. Now
mhm.
I think, no, I don't need to push the wheelchair all day, and I can do exercise.
Yeah,
And that makes more sense.
it does. It makes a lot of sense. It's also a movement that arguably our bodies haven't really evolved to do, that
No, yeah.
repetitive kind of tricep
Well,
extension.
look, you've hurt your hand right now, which was caused by a wheelchair, and now you're compromised until that gets better. So
Yes.
any strength you have got from pushing the chair, by the time your hand's healed, you may find actually pushing the chair is even harder, and then you might hurt yourself again. It just makes more sense. It's taken me a long time to come around to that thinking. And I'm
Yes.
not saying I don't go along the road thinking you could be using a low level of assist right now and still pushing and getting some exercise. But to be honest, it's so liberating not to push that you just don't do it.
So we've heard a lot there about the kind of story of your injury career and then move to Phoenix Instinct, the development of Carbon Black and now Phoenix Eye, which we'll come to talk more about. But given that the series is aimed predominantly at people who are newly injured, I wonder if we could talk a little bit about how you coped in those early days. And obviously, it's a different picture now. Well, or perhaps not. I'd be interested to hear your opinion in terms of the rehab opportunities we have. But talk to me a little bit
Hmm.
about how you processed it post injury, how you coped, how you existed.
It's I have found it very difficult to completely remember what I felt. I think it's all got put away. I had a very strong mother who helped me and supported me a lot. But, spinal rehab took me from being a little boy into a grown up
Hmm.
really fast. The BBC filmed a documentary of me while I was in rehab. It was for an education series, and they wanted someone. I was doing some work with the scientists at the hospital on FES, functional electrical stimulation,
Hmm.
and they had me hooked up to a computer, walking up and down between parallel bars, wearing all these electrodes on my legs. And the Beeb came along and they filmed this documentary with me. And I look at that now and think, oh wow, look at that little kid. But he was so matter of fact. I sit there in the physiotherapy department being interviewed, and I talk about it like I'm almost in the third person already. I think it's so devastating that the only way to get through it is to realize it's down to you and you can do it. And I remember one morning having a bit of a tantrum to the nurses, and they came in, lights on, said, "Right, Andrew, up you get." And I said, "I'm not getting up today." And she said, "Oh, okay. So you're not going to physio?" And I said, "No." And I was in a real mood. She said, "Okay." And she walked off. And I was quite surprised. That wasn't the reaction a petulant child expects. I expected her to argue with me or tell me I had to go. And about half an hour later, the head of physio came in. His name was Norman. This was a no messing guy. And he said, "What's this I hear about you not getting up today, Andrew?" He said, "Look, kid, you might be the youngest person in this unit. I don't expect any special treatment. Everyone here is in the same boat. If you want to lie in your bed and rot, go for it. Otherwise, I'll be in the gym." And he walked away. And that was it. Boom.
Hmm.
That was a life changing moment. That's when I realized it's down to me. There's no point making a fuss. There's no point crying about it. There's no point kicking off and making other people feel crap about this. You're in this situation. And I think in the early days, you believe it's probably not permanent. I think for me, it took probably about 5 years before I stopped thinking, oh, can I feel something? Can I move something?
Hmm.
Um, Stopped listening to the TV reports saying there was going to be this massive breakthrough. I've heard all the stories of the massive breakthroughs. I don't even pay attention to them anymore. They will come.
Well, they're still happening. Just
They're
to,
still happening, and they'll still take 10 years.
yeah.
And when in 10 years' time, maybe things will be different.
Hmm.
There's still exciting stuff happening, but for me, who's now coming up to 41 years down the road, I've stopped paying attention to that.
Hmm.
And that doesn't mean I wouldn't turn it back in a heartbeat if I could. Of course I would.
Yeah.
Um, but it's just a day to day get through one day at a time. And gradually you'll look back and think how far you've come.
Hmm.
When I look back at photos of me as a 14-year-old or 16-year-old at school in Nairn Academy, paralyzed, thinking, how did you even go through that? How
Mm.
did you even go back to school and face all those kids you used to know now in a chair? That itself's a massive journey, and you just do it. You just do it one day at a time. And eventually you look back and think, yeah, you did great. You are doing awesome. And I
Yeah.
think it's important to reward yourself a little bit of pat on the back because it is hard. I mean, it really, really is.
And my
Uh,
my friend Joanna, who you've met,
mhm.
said a similar thing to me once, probably when I was feeling a bit overwhelmed. And I thought, how do you cope with the enormity of such a devastating condition, which just affects every single aspect of your life, not just on one day, but the next day and the next day to infinity. And she said something along the lines of, I just write a little list at the end of each year of things I did. And the first year, it's things like I had a bath by myself, I went to the shops by myself. But then, after 2, 3, 4, 5 years, it's things like did a marathon, climbed this really tough hill or whatever it might be. These personal goals that build year on year. And
That's
as you
right.
said, all of a sudden you look back and think, actually, you've come really far.
And when you put yourself forward to have to do something, like in your situation, you have a job, you have to go to work. And I have a job, I have to go to work. If I don't go to work, I'm not going to make any money. My business is going to close down. If you don't want to work, well, they'll let you go. What are you going to do then? And so when you've got that commitment of other things you have to do, the fact you're doing it in a chair becomes a little bit less important.
Hmm.
Um, One thing I've always thought though is you do have to work really hard to get other people to see beyond it. Um, I've had job interviews where people, I haven't told them I'm a wheelchair user, and you turn up in the interview room and their jaws drop. I've been interviewed on the steps of buildings I can't get into because I knew if I told them I use a wheelchair, they wouldn't even interview me. And when you're a young man going on dates, a young woman trying to meet a boyfriend, it's a
Hmm.
big barrier. And this is something that I personally am trying to achieve with the new technology we've developed. That maybe some of the struggles taken away for that wheelchair user, and maybe they'll feel a bit more empowered. Maybe there'll be another young 15, 14-year-old that will actually go out with their friends because they don't need to rely on someone else helping them get up that hill that
Yeah,
they have to go to so to get to school or to go to the pub or whatever it is. Those social barriers, I think, are some of the hardest things to deal with.
they are. And it's about smoothing out the creases in those everyday interactions that make it them difficult. Like if you get stuck on opening a door or, as you say, up a hill, you are forced to acknowledge the wheelchair. And yes, it's a physical thing.
Yes.
You can't ignore it. But like you, I don't want the fact that I'm a wheelchair user to be my whole personality or to be, that's what I'm known as. And I think you're right that that technology can smooth out those creases and make things just much more approachable, much more accessible.
If the person can feel empowered that they're not going to get stuck on that slope, or that they can go to the interview and the way they roll in, they're light, and they're
Mm,
light because they haven't endured a horrendous journey to try and get to the interview room, and they're not covered in filth from pushing the chair and breaking into a sweat and then having to undo their tie, where immediately it looks like, oh god, this person's had a tough day. That's not the first impression I want to give. I want to give the first impression of me.
yeah,
And if they look at the chair, that they're thinking, wow, that's pretty awesome. And those positive first impressions, I think, will make a very big difference.
they do. Okay, so now let's come on to talk about the Phoenix Eye if we can, because it's certainly the thing I find most interesting and exciting about the company, although I am looking at the bags because I need to travel independently soon. And I did it recently with a suitcase and it wasn't ideal. So
Some
that's a
work.
separate conversation. But well, maybe I'll dwell briefly on the bags just to say that although I haven't had personal experience, friends and colleagues have used them and have nothing but positive feedback for them. And they do seem like excellent mobility aids, independence aids. Um,
Well, I think having to carry your own luggage is one reason why a lot of wheelchair users won't travel independently.
hmm,
It's that rehab is so, certainly was, as long as I've been in it, so grinding on the fact of independence.
mhm,
To have to ask someone or rely on someone to lift your case off the carousel and then think, how do I get this to the taxi rank? And then you get to your hotel and you think, how do I get this from the taxi to the check-in desk, to my room, and then back again when my flight's leaving at 5:30 in the morning? I'm going to have to leave my hotel room and cart this damn suitcase along the floor, or put a bag on my lap and hold the strap in my teeth. And I just thought there was a better way. And it's actually remarkably simple. And it's heartening for me when many of our customers send us photos and videos of themselves traveling with their independence because they've got a Phoenix bag. And it doesn't seem like a lot, but actually it makes a very big difference. It makes a
yeah,
big difference to when I go up to a carousel, luggage carousel, I grab my bag, stick it on the chair, and I'm gone. Other travelers are still waiting for their case. And
mhm,
they're looking at me like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool.
yeah,
And I'm not interested in them telling me it's cool. I'm interested in them uh, looking at me and not thinking this guy's got struggle.
yeah. It's
That's
changed.
what I was glad to get rid of.
It's changing their attitude, isn't it? Because I think the first assumption for many people is they see vulnerability, they see weakness, they see that person can't do this independently. So to see someone effortlessly collect their bag and just go about their business like anyone else, that I think
Yeah.
that's powerful for the
Bit by bit, we will chip away and create those positive perceptions.
yes.
Um, the bags definitely are part of doing it, and the chair will be part of doing it. Maybe technology in 20 years' time will be embedded in a new kinds of wheelchairs. I can't even think what they'll be. Maybe you'll think about how far your phone has come. I mean, when I was first injured, the telephone was a landlocked rotary dial device.
Hmm.
Now look at it, it's barely even a phone anymore, so it's a life device.
Yep.
A wheelchair be a life device? Can a wheelchair be equipped with apps that give you all sorts of new features? What would it do? And when you move away from that mind lock of it being mechanical, why has a wheelchair been mechanical for so long? Is it because the developers thought if they added batteries, they would get too heavy? Did they just not want to do it? Well, that aside, now it's done.
Hmm.
We can put anything. This chair could interface with your phone and in any new ways that we're still to think of. So I think there's a lot of development still to be done,
I
and
think
all of these things will continue to chip away at the negative perceptions and will continue to empower users.
absolutely. And I wholeheartedly agree with that, that this is just the start, hopefully.
Yeah.
I'm still at an age where I can hopefully look forward to seeing decades of advancement in wheelchair technology. But for those who are unfamiliar with what exactly the Phoenix Eye is, which if you're paying attention to any sort of wheelchair related media at the moment would be challenging, but um, perhaps you can give a brief rundown of what makes the Phoenix Eye different from my
Okay.
RGK chair, for example.
So the first thing you see when looking at the Phoenix Eye is it's carbon. It's a very ergonomic, rounded shape. And that was something I quite deliberately wanted it to look modern and high tech. And I'd always had a bit of an issue with the fact that wheelchairs were very right angled and straight lined when our bodies aren't. So this is a very rounded ergo shape, which is quite difficult to manufacture in different forms. There's the reason why wheelchairs are all right angled and straight line, because it's easy to take a piece of tubing, bend it, cut it to length, and weld another bit onto it. That's why wheelchairs look the way they do. But I didn't like that squareness. So on as a design aspect, look at it as very kind of organic form. But the
Hmm.
big difference is the front caster wheels on the Phoenix Eye are electric. And you wouldn't know just to look at it that they're electric.
Hmm.
But by electrifying them, it takes away all of the resistance and drag that is faced by a manual wheelchair. So this chair is pulling you. You might be familiar with things with add-ons, power add-ons on the back, like smart drives and smooths and stuff like that. Well, they will take you in a straight line, but they're not great indoors. They can't go backwards and they can't give you any kind of assistance downhill. You certainly don't want them turned on when you go downhill. You have to
Hmm.
turn them off. Well, the Phoenix Eye, because the power is coming from the front, it's pulling the chair. So you can push it at the same time. So now all four wheels are being propelled. This gives you four-wheel drive.
Hmm.
You think, oh, what do you want a four-wheel drive wheelchair for? Well, I'll tell you, if you've got four-wheel drive, going across the grass, the gravel, through snow, all those conditions is a lot easier. Hence why four-wheel drive vehicles have four-wheel drive. It works the same on a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Um, I've got braking for going downhill. So when I come to a slope, I'm no longer gripping onto the hand rims, trying to slow this thing down. I mean, think about that for a second. Wheelchairs don't have downhill brakes.
Hmm.
Now, I don't think for 1 second the CEO of any of these big mobility corps has a bicycle that doesn't have brakes. And they certainly wouldn't put their child on a bicycle that doesn't have brakes. But we're supposed to use wheelchairs that don't have brakes for going downhill. And worse than that, if our kids have to use wheelchairs, they've got to not have any brakes. This is lunacy.
Hmm.
It's not actually in the regulatory standard for wheelchairs to have downhill brakes, but it is in the standard that a wheelchair can be parked with a parking brake on a hill with a 100 kilogram load in a forwards direction and a backwards direction and not move at all.
Yeah.
What happens when you release the brake doesn't matter. So innovators are facing this sort of thing. So we've got downhill braking, which is amazing. It's life-changing on its own. It doesn't matter if it's pouring rain or snow, it still works.
This is the thing for people who don't realize quite how significant this is. I think this is something you have to have used a wheelchair to appreciate why it's relevant because you think, well, why don't you just use your push rooms? But it's really not as simple as that.
Well, can you imagine going to a bicycle store and the salesman saying, now, this is a great bike. You don't need brakes. You want to slow down, just grab hold of the tires.
Yeah.
Now, no consumer is going to buy that bike. And
Yeah.
that's what it's like for a wheelchair user. I used to be terrified in my NHS 20 kilogram wheelchair and sit at the top of a hill and think, not only have I got to go down this hill in this thing and not just go flying off the pavement into the oncoming cars,
Mhm.
I've got to get back up it again. I used to get halfway down some hills and just have to stop the chair pushed against a lamppost so I could take a break for a minute. And that's that's still like that. That's not
Mhm.
okay. So
It
we
is.
got downhill braking, but the big thing for me is the agility.
Mhm.
Just to because the front wheels are turning all the time, and the the direction you point the caster forks is the direction the chair will travel. So I can go from moving forward to moving backwards in a seamless move without even having to stop first and change a switch or anything. It just you get used to with your body movement being able to rotate the caster fork forwards and back. So when I roll up to the fridge, I roll up forwards, grab the fridge handle, pull back slightly, and now I'm rolling backwards. I don't have to take one hand off and move back like this. And the same as opening a door.
Mhm.
Um, and it's that I move around my kitchen virtually hands-free. So it's got a very low speed setting. So I can, grab some toast out of the toaster and just with one push, just push off the counter and the chair will start moving and take me over to the next counter where I will maybe grab my tea and then push off again and go over to the table without having to push at the same time. So the front wheels are activated by you pushing the hand rims. So they've got sensors inside the wheel. So the wheel knows when you're starting to turn it and it will activate. And it knows when you bring it to a stop and it'll stop.
Mhm.
So there's no kind of big switches to stop, start, and things you have to control. It's all very intuitive.
It is.
Uh, it seems so obvious now.
And
And of course, the portability.
yes.
It's the same as car transferring your sub four. It's a little bit heavier in sub four, but it's only 6.5 kilos. And then there's battery life. People worry about battery, about range anxiety. Well, we use interchangeable batteries, same sort of batteries you'd have on your cordless power tools. So one big battery will gives me about 10, 12 hours of use on a busy day. I think from one battery I can do about 8 miles, which is pretty decent. Of
Mhm.
course, it depends on the gradient you're traveling on, depends how heavy you are, depends on the headwind, depends on the texture of the road surface and the cambers and all those things. But if you run out of power, you just take the battery out and plug in another one. So battery life is down to the user.
Yes.
If you're worried about battery life, then keep an extra battery with you. I have an extra battery in my backpack all the time. So if I do suddenly run out or I forgot to charge it last night and I've gone out and I've only got one bar left, I know I've got enough to do another few hours anyway.
And even if you do get caught out, the worst case scenario is you're in the same situation as you would have been with a manual chair.
You've still got a manual chair,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
You've still got a manual chair, and that is a real benefit. So if you have gone on holiday and you're sitting on the flight, you think, I left the charger on the kitchen table. It'll
Mhm.
be okay.
Yeah.
You know,
And I think having having had a brief stint in your chair some months ago, I couldn't quite believe the agility that you have, and I think you really do have to experience it to, yeah, I just pushing
well,
along.
I was at a occupational therapy conference a few months ago, and one of the other speakers, I was speaking there, and one of the other speakers had a smart drive on her chair.
Mhm.
Other power assists are available, but I think they all work on the same thing. And I was at the bar and I grabbed my beer and I came over to the table and I said, just, yeah, I'm hands free. She said, yeah, I can do that. And so she then moved off to go over to the bar. But just to turn her wheelchair, because the smart drive's only going forwards and it's at the back of the chair and her steering's at the front of the chair, you got this long distance between the power and the steering. And it's like she's got to turn this huge leverage around to try and make her chair go. And then she had to start it. And when she came back, she said, "Yours is a lot easier, isn't it?" I
Mhm.
said, "Yeah, because my power is in the steering.
Mhm.
So the to start it is literally the lightest move, and to stop it is a light move. And if you are moving really fast, you just press the button to hit the brakes, and it'll stop for you."
Yeah,
Um, it's hugely intuitive, and I may sound like I'm blowing my own trumpet with it, but I've thought about some way of powering front wheels on a wheelchair for many, many years. When I was 16, I would sit looking at my chair thinking, how could I drive those wheels? How could those front wheels be pulling me while I'm pushing? And I thought of all sorts of chain drives and belt systems and stuff like that. And I didn't ever develop any of it, obviously. But now, with lithium ion batteries being so light, we think that we've added less than 2 kilograms to the weight of the wheelchair.
that is really remarkable. I think when you look at the other options available, like Smart Drive Smooth or like the rear
E-motion
wheel,
wheels,
the rear wheel, these are anywhere between 5 to 20 plus kilograms. It is huge.
it's huge.
So to think that you can get a battery that is presumably wirelessly communicating with the front wheels.
No, we don't use any Bluetooth. It is hardwired, and that's quite
Hardwired,
deliberate.
okay,
There have been some quite serious problems with some of the brands we've talked about and their Bluetooth communication
right.
with the device,
I remember.
and
Yeah.
people losing control because their smartwatch that's connected to or their control unit runs out of power, and then the device on the back is still going.
Mhm.
So no, our wheels are hardwired
And is
to
that
straight to the battery,
all done internally?
all done internally within the frame.
Yeah.
So people do say to us, "Oh, can I get those caster wheels and stick them on my sub 4?" And say, "Well, no, I know it doesn't work like that because there is literally wires running from the caster wheels up into the frame, under the seat into a control unit, and then out to the battery, which sits underneath the seat." Now we do think, and we are looking at ways of making a kit so
Mm.
that potentially, people could fit these to their chair, but that's another fairly considerable bit of development.
Yes, one step at a time, I suppose. Okay, so well, yeah, we've spoken a bit about the Phoenix Eye itself and the innovation that it offers in terms of agility, wheelchair users, and next steps. Um, I suppose it's early days, but where do you see things going from here?
For the company, where it goes from the
For the
company, or you
company?
mean in wheelchair world?
Well, both, but I suppose I meant the company.
Well, for the company, I see it as uh, step one is to launch this. Where are we today? We're on the 11th of April. We're recording this. It's a Thursday. On Monday, I'm going to Norway, which so we'll have the first public showing of the Phoenix Eye at 3 trade shows that next week. And when I come back, we are going to make the Phoenix Eye website live, and people will be able to order it. And that'll be the teller.
Mhm.
Have I? Hopefully, I've done all this work, and people are going to really absorb it and want to have their own chair, and we'll find out. And where it goes from there, I guess there'll be some level of scale up. I don't really want the business to grow to a point that I'm going to have to get investors on board to take it to the next level. That's what I want to avoid, because I'm very driven by product.
Mhm.
And there's this thing in business, are you product or are you profit driven? When Steve Jobs started Apple, he was product driven. He wanted a great product. The profit will come later if you make a great thing. But a lot of businesses, especially investors, are profit driven, and that's what matters. For me, it's a product thing. So I want to continue to drive it the way
Maybe
I see it and develop more things.
Maybe we can dwell on that point for just a second, because I think a lot
Hmm.
of people, wheelchair users included, will look at the price of a lot of mobility equipment and think, how could anyone who produces these be product driven? Look
Mhm.
at the price of them. I mean, what do you say to that?
I say to that, we are a company employing 6 people, and that actually, and those are electronics engineers, composites engineers, and marketing, and we have to be able to make money
Hmm.
to pay these people. And things like bags, you say, well, how can a wheelchair bag, cost £300 or whatever some of them are costing? Say, well, we have to buy these in container loads at a time, many hundreds at a time. And they will then sit in storage until they're all used. And that can be 30, 40, 50,000 pounds tied up in bags sitting in a room waiting to be sold until they make their money back. And it's much the same with wheelchairs. We have to pay everyone every month. And this is what any business will say. But the reality of Britain is Britain don't pay for wheelchairs.
Mm.
One of the reasons wheelchairs are expensive is because insurance pays for them in most other countries. In Australia, Canada, America, Europe, the end user is not the person paying for the chair. It's that term insurance job.
Yeah.
That is something I think the big corps have cashed in on. And that's rippled through the whole industry.
Mhm.
Um,
I think it is important.
that's one of the reasons why your basic aluminium frame is going to cost 4, 5, 6, 7,000 pounds. I know that some of the chairs are 9,000, 12,000 for what's just a metal set of tubing with four wheels bolted to it.
Yeah.
And making our chair out of carbon fiber is a time-consuming thing to make. We can go through a whole process of 7 days, 14 days of manufacturing on a chair to then find at the last stage of it curing, it doesn't cure properly, and it's go in the bin. You have to start again. So we have to wear that. Yes, we could put our power assist on a much cheaper metal tubular chair, and maybe we will. But that's another development.
Yeah.
That's hiring people that are metal workers and finding facilities where you can weld, and it's a different thing.
I hope you don't mind. I asked that to make the point that, people aren't out there to make a profit, or at least people like you aren't
Hmm.
out there to make a profit off of newly injured people who are looking for mobility aids. You have lived experience. You are there product driven rather than profit driven. You're not here to exploit people. And this is just what
And
it
I'll tell you a little bit more about winning the Toyota Mobility Challenge was incredible. It gave us as a small business an opportunity that most small mobility companies would never get.
Mhm.
Lots of these small wheelchair companies want to innovate like we have done. They just can't wear that cost. This has cost $1 million to develop,
Yeah.
every penny of it.
Mhm.
But not only that, once that $1 million is gone, you've got all this infrastructure that you set up to make this happen. You've got these expensive personnel and facilities and overheads, and now you need to wear that. So the money's got to start coming so that
Yeah.
you can wear that cost. So if we said, well, I'm just going to do this Toyota challenge, make a nice wheelchair, and then roll the company back to just making wheelie bags, thanks very much, and then I could have done that. But I think it'd be a huge missed opportunity. But
Totally agree.
we can't make a smart carbon fiber wheelchair and sell it for less than the other companies can sell a tubular metal chair.
No, and for what it's worth, I think the base price for the Phoenix Pure, which is available for purchase at the moment, is
Mm.
about £5,500.
5.5, yeah.
Which is comparable to, as I said earlier, this cost £5,500. And for what
Mm-hmm.
it's worth, had the Pure been available at the time, I would certainly have gone for it purely on the basis of aesthetics, because it still has that very modern, high-tech, elegant, fully carbon fiber
Mm.
look to it. It is a beautiful chair and it turns heads. Um, and I think the Phoenix Eye will continue to do that. So there's
Yes.
a warning telling me that the meeting will end soon. So perhaps that's an
All
appropriate
right.
time to bring things to a close. So this is going on public sale next week in Norway as a launch
In
event.
Norway, and then the following week, only because Norway, because their trade shows have come round when they have. We have a dealer in Norway that's already selling our Phoenix bags, and he said, Andrew, you've got this new chair. I've got trade shows in April and May. Can I have one? And I just thought, yes, actually, you can. It's ready. It's passed its regulatory testing that was independently done in Germany, and it's all certified and ready to go. So we may as well just crack on with it.
Would there have been an opportunity to display this at NIDEX? It's not a show I'm that familiar with, but I'm vaguely aware of it.
Well, we weren't certified by
Right.
then,
Okay.
and getting that certification, which only came through a few days ago, was important.
Mhm.
And also trade shows, when you're wearing the cost. I mean, this trade shows are going to Germany. I'm not wearing the cost of those shows. The dealer's doing that. He's got other products he's selling. We're just helping him with our chair. But going to a trade show such as the one you mentioned for 4 days, you're looking at about £10,000.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and you got to get your team there. You got to put them in hotels. You got travel. You've got graphics for the stand. You've got the stand space, the whole thing, and that's a hefty hit.
Yeah.
And my previous experience of some of these shows when I was doing the Carbon Black was that they very rarely sell stuff at these shows. It's a good platform to show your stuff, but you could be months of following those leads before anyone actually comes forward with a sale. So it's trade shows are something I'm a little wary of because they can be hopelessly expensive. And then the conversation we just had about prices, everything goes up.
And as you say, a lot of marketing advertising can be and is done online nowadays. So via things like Instagram and the like.
Mm-hmm.
But, well, thank you very much for taking the time to chat to me.
No worries.
I really look forward to seeing
Have
how
fun.
this evolves over time, and I hope eventually to get my hands on one because, uh,
We'll get you on one.
yeah,
Yes.
one way or
We'll
another.
get those grant applications going.
Yep. Okay.
I mean,
Thank you
that's
so much.
one we haven't talked about. Systems like access to work are there for
Yeah.
people who do have jobs and needs assistive technology to be able to do that job. And that's a route we're going to navigate on trying to get access to work support for our chairs. And I don't see why not, because they pay for other assistive technology.
No, and their budget far exceeds the cost of the Phoenix Eye. So why
Mm-hmm.
they shouldn't, yeah, is anyone's best guess.
Well, let's hope so.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank
All
you very
right.
much, Andrew, and all the
Pleasure
best
talking
as
to you.
always.
All right.
Okay.